Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the warm welcome. Just quick check. I hope I am clearly audible. One or two quick responses on the chat will do. And secondly, if my screen is clearly visible. Yeah, thank you for the confirmations. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I hope each one of you is keeping safe and sound. And, these are some unprecedented, strange times. But as all adverse situations do, this time period has also given a lot of unique opportunities to us, and it's up to us how we make the best use of them. And although we'll be discussing a few of these things during the course of my presentation, but the world is completely changing, more so post COVID. And what we will do in this session is we'll take you through how you can prepare yourself for education abroad. What are the kind of options that you have? What are the kind of courses that you will be able to do? What would a university want to see in a prospective candidate? And how you prepare a strong application to convince the university that you are that candidate who should be in the classroom. So we'll be doing all this stuff, and of course we'll be taking questions also. So broadly, during the course of my session, I'll be stopping in between a couple of times, and at that time I'll be taking a few questions, and of course at the end also, if there are some questions to be answered, we'll do that. So my humble submission is that in case during the presentation you have some questions, please keep them with yourself till the time I pause specifically, and then I'll be very happy to answer the questions. And also, I'll be taking a lot of stuff in the terms of how you can prepare. So, make sure that you ask me questions, you take up a lot of things that can add value to you. So quick introduction to Jamboree. So Jamboree is a 27-year-old organization. And since these 27 years, we train students in exams that are needed to go and study abroad. So we train students on GRE, GMAT, IELTS and TOEFL. And also we work with the students to make strong applications for them so that they can be accepted in the universities abroad. As of now, we are having 39 centers spread in 22 cities across 4 countries. And since these 27 years, this is the only domain of education into which we are. That's the only thing that we do. And therefore, the kind of expertise that we have is quite unparalleled. So that's a small introduction about Jamboree. You can visit our website to know more details. You'll find a lot of stuff there. So I will not take too much time introducing the organization. Let's go straight away into the session. So let's start off by asking a very, very basic question. A very basic question to all of you, that why would an Indian student want to go and study abroad? And if I can see a few answers to this question on the chat box. Why do you think an Indian student would want to go and study abroad? A quick few responses would be appreciated and would help me to take it forward. Yeah. So why do you think Indian students would want to go and study abroad? Opportunities, yes, to gain international exposure, right? What else? These two are very right points. Yeah. High pay, absolutely. Better research facilities, very right. Better academics, perfectly right, Pushpal. And all of you are bang on. These are some very critical factors. So broadly, if you look at The reason, it would be quality of education, as you have said. So when you go to a university to study abroad, you would very, very frequently find Nobel Prize winners teaching full time in the classrooms. In India, you don't find that, right? But if you go to UK, if you go to US, even Singapore, even Germany, you will find very frequently Nobel Prize winners teaching full time in the classrooms. And we can well imagine the kind of classroom that would be where a Nobel Prize winner is teaching economics or teaching whatever field of study full time. Second, somebody mentioned about from your side, great research and technology. Although I must say, in last 10 years, Indian research has moved very, very fast. Very great developments have happened, but still we are way behind what the world standard is. We currently spend less than 0.2% of our GDP on research, but there are some very, very small countries which spend much more. In fact, Israel is the big daddy of research in the world. They spend 4% of their GDP on research and development, and that's why you would find some great innovations coming out of Israel. Even small countries like Japan, Vietnam, UK, Germany, all these countries have great research and technology exposure for the students. And that is a great motivator for students to go and study. Of course, great internships and jobs. And, nowadays, one more factor which has come into play is that whether a country is giving you opportunity to settle down further in that country. So PR, that means the permanent residency, is becoming one of the major factors. One more factor which is very important to India and which contributes to a great, great extent why students go and study abroad. Why would you want to go and study abroad? Is the kind of competition we face in India. Uh, I don't know how many of you are wanting to do an MBA later on, but the top exam in this country, in our country, for getting into the best management colleges, which are the Indian Institutes of Management, 2021 colleges, which get you entry through a common admission test, CAT, which happens in November every year. So last year, close to 210,000 students appeared for the CAT exam for 20 IIMs, which had 4,000 odd seats. And if you compare these with the top MBA programs in the world, if you compare these with the top 3 MBA programs in the world, let's look at how the things get compared. So, Wharton intake is 863. Columbia, it's 753. Harvard, it's 928. So the top 3 MBA programs in the world have more intake as compared to the top 20 IIMs in India, and the irony of the situation is that none of our Indian top colleges are in the top 100 of the world, whereas these colleges about which I have talked about are just the top 3. So the common thing that comes in a student in India is that you don't tend to get the best value of your efforts that you put. And that's why students want to go and study abroad. And when you want to go and study abroad, which are the countries where students go and study? Let's look at that. So United States of America, UK and rest of Europe, Canada, New Zealand, Asia, and when I'm talking Asia, I'll be talking about Singapore and Hong Kong. So these are the predominant countries where students go and study. If you look at this list closely and carefully, some very important countries where students go and study are not in this list. So for example, Russia is not on this list. Germany is not on this list, although I have mentioned rest of Europe and I will take up Germany separately. China is not on this list. Japan is not on this list. Reason being that if you look at this list very carefully, all of these are English-speaking countries. And if you talk about Germany, if you talk about Russia, China, Japan, a lot of the best programs in these countries are still taught in their native language. And therefore, it becomes difficult for an Indian student to go and study there. Although I must say, the situation is also changing very rapidly. especially in countries like Germany, and I'll cover Germany separately. But broadly, these are the countries where students go and study. And USA, in spite of whatever is happening, whatever is being said and done, still remains the number one country to go and study. As per the latest report, you know, uh, close to 4.5 lakh uh, Chinese students study in USA. India is close to 2.5 lakhs, and these two countries form the bulk of the international students. Close to 15 lakh international students study in USA. So these two countries form the bulk of the students from international shores coming to study in USA. So USA remains the number one country. UK is coming up very well. And I'll discuss all of these countries one by one. So let's go and check what are the pros and cons of these countries. Let's start with Canada. So I'm sure you all reading, you must be having conversations around this, that Canada is currently the most sought after destination. Reason being, Canada is extremely flexible in terms of the courses that it gives, the job opportunities are great, and most importantly, the PR, the permanent residence opportunities that the Canadian government is giving to the students and the working professionals who are coming from outside is actually the main driving force for why people want to come into Canada. So Canadian PR is very, very strong in the world. So that is driving people from across the globe to Canada. Having said that, there are some negative points also, although negative might not be the correct word, but still, for the want of a better word, there are only 4 to 5 great universities inside Canada. So there is the University of British Columbia, there is the University of Toronto, University of Ontario, there is the McGill, Alberta, McMaster's, and you can count these universities on your fingertips. Only 4 to 5 great colleges. And the predominant criteria for getting admissions into these colleges is your marks. They very, very closely look at what you have scored academically, and that forms a great basis for students getting into Canada. So your academic history, your academic strength, your scores form the very, very important weightage criteria for students who want to get into Canada. And that's why the competition into Canadian universities is becoming very, very cutthroat, right? So that's a broad synopsis about Canada. I'll have some more discussion about Canada later on in my presentation when I go into some, course specific things. Let's look at UK, rest of Europe. So traditionally, if you look at history also, UK has been the most prominent destination, and historical personalities have also gone to study in UK because you have great colleges like the Oxford, the Cambridge, London Business School, London School of Economics, Imperial College of London. All of these are in UK, and therefore people want to go and study in UK. Having said that, since last few years, UK has been continuously showing a downtrend in terms of the number of students going to UK and study. Primary reason was lack of scholarships, because any which ways pound is quite costly as compared to the Indian rupee, and in the absence of scholarships, it becomes more difficult for students to go and study. Also, one of the major problems and the challenges a student faces in Europe is the language issue. So if you go to Germany, if you go to other European countries, you need to have a very good working knowledge of the local language. So because if you want to go to Germany, you will not be able to succeed if you don't know German. In spite of getting into a program which might be taught in English language, you still need to have a great knowledge of German language if you want to get a job, if you want to network, if you want to get into the top projects. You need to know German language. So that's one challenge. And thirdly, the job opportunities in Europe are slightly iffy as of now. Europe historically also had a policy where they first prefer the students who belong to Eurozone And only once they don't find anybody who belongs to Eurozone, then they look at the experts. You know, uh, now with Brexit also looming large, although it is expected to go rather smoothly now because Boris Johnson has a favorable majority, but Brexit concerns are looming large over the job scenario. Any which ways, the job scenario in Europe was slightly different. So still a lot of concerns around Europe, but UK has taken some very positive steps. That first thing that they have done is the post-study work visa earlier was only a few months, but now it has been extended to 2 years. So the number of students wanting to go into UK has already seen a positive upshoot trend now. So Europe will also stabilize slowly, but currently that's how Europe stands as of now. Singapore, Hong Kong, very competitive, great places to be, uh, especially because they are very close to home, very economical as compared to studying in Europe or USA, and they also have great PRs. Currently, Hong Kong would not be preferred because Hong Kong is undergoing political turmoil. So we would not be advising anyone for Hong Kong for the next 2 or 3 years. But Singapore is a great place because two of the world's top 20 universities, the NUS and the NTU, are in Singapore, and the students across the world want to get into them, and therefore the competition is very, very cutthroat. And again, Singapore will also take admissions primarily and majorly through what you score in your academics. So Singapore is also very similar to Canada in that sense. In fact, more competitive as compared to Canada when it looks at academics. Australia, New Zealand, if you're wanting to go into hospitality related courses, hotel, travel, tourism, then Australia, New Zealand is a great place to be. In fact, the best courses in these fields are in Australia. Having said that, since some last few years, some good courses in engineering and accountancy and related courses and management have started to come up in universities like University of Monash, the University of New South Wales, Australian National University. So all these universities are reporting now good uh, courses apart from these vocational type of courses, and therefore it would be a good thing to have Australia, New Zealand as one of the destinations in your uh, kitty. But if you are looking at engineering programs or management programs, then don't keep it as the number one destination if you are looking at academically great programs, right? So that's broadly about these study abroad destinations. Let's now look at and understand the US education system. So US, as I told you before, continues to be the number one destination, whatever is happening around in spite of that. Reason being, US offers some great flexibilities to a student which no other education system in the world offers. So let's quickly look at the kind of flexibilities that a student in United States gets. The first thing would be course flexibility. So you don't have to compulsorily pursue your majors in the field in which you did your bachelor's. You can change your majors and go into a different master's field. So for example, if I do a BCom, I will not be able to do a MTech in India. I won't be able to do it. If you are doing a BTech or BE, you will not be able to do a MCom. But in United States, that's not the case. You can change your field in the masters. So for example, Ankit did his engineering, electronics and communication, and then he did his master's in biomedical engineering. Rashmi had an engineering degree in civil engineering and then did master's in financial engineering. So complete switchover from civil engineering to a finance background, right? Also, you can mix and match a lot of topics and majors together. So you can mix science with humanities, you can mix science with commerce, you can do science with fine arts, you can mix and match all these courses. So for example, Bhushan had a mechanical engineering, and side by side he did marketing, and now he's working with General Motors in their sales division. Dipesh did softwares and photography side by side, and is now working in the research and development wing of this company called Canon. So you can mix and match cross functional majors at the same time, and you can do a lot of these things which will increase your employability, which can help you combine your passion with the kind of technical education that you are taking. So that's one of the major flexibilities that you get. Second flexibility is the flexibility of duration. So master's program typically is of 2 years, but in United States, you can prepone your master's program, you can postpone your master programs also. So for example, when you go to US, you have to accumulate credits to complete the program. And in Indian scenario, we are trained since so many years to have more than 4 or 5 subjects at one time. So that gives a great skill and experience and ability to handle more than 2 3 subjects at a time. And therefore, when an Indian student goes and studies, if the university says you do 3 courses in this semester, Indian student does 4, sometimes 5. And by doing those additional courses, what you are able to achieve is that you are able to prepone and finish your master's degree in 1.5 years, 6 months before time. And why would a student do that? Reason being, most of the Indian students and international students are on a combination of loans and scholarships. And therefore, when you complete your degree 6 years advance, then firstly, of course, you save your living expense for 6 months. And secondly, because you get employed quickly, you start recovering the cost that you have spent, you start repaying your loans also. So that's a great advantage that a student gets when you go into US. Also, you can postpone. So for example, in today's time, this is a very bad time. Jobs are not there, uncertainty in the world. So what a student in US can do, you can keep on adding more courses to your student visa. And when you feel the economy is doing great, or you have accumulated some more skill set of a job which is available, then you can decide to graduate. So therefore, the flexibility to finish a course early and the flexibility to finish a course late, that's a huge flexibility that you get. Thirdly, the way academics are delivered inside the classroom in United States is very different. So most of the systems in the world, including India, are dependent on 1 or 2 main exams. So when we were in class 10th, we had class 10th boards, class 12th boards. Now you are in a semester system. So your semester exams carry a lot of weightage. If someone of you is in annual systems, annual exams will hold a lot of weightage. But United States does not keep focus only on one exam. So they would distribute the weightage of the exam. They would keep you some marks for your participation in the classroom. They will give you some marks for the quizzes that you participate, some marks for the kind of assignments that you do. So, only focus on one exam is not there. And therefore, a student can, control his academic performance in a much better way. Also, there is a lot of focus on practical training, practical stuff, and therefore they encourage students to do internships, co-ops, and they give credits for internships and co-ops. So when you do something which is giving you an opportunity to apply your learnings in a on-the-job scenario, they will give you more credit for that. They also encourage practical stuff to the extent that they give huge benefits to students who want to do PhD in USA. So number one benefit is that they don't charge tuition fees from students who are doing PhD in the US. They would only ask you to bear your living expenses. So tuition fees is completely funded by US universities when you do a PhD. Secondly, they would guarantee you a H-1B visa if you do a PhD from US. So H-1B visa, as you all must be knowing, and for the benefit of those who are not still aware about it, H1B visa is a visa which is required for working inside United States. And every year, this visa is given through a very stringent lottery system. You have to go in through a tough lottery system, and 55,000 visas are given every year. Now, when you do a PhD from USA, you are exempt from this lottery and you are guaranteed a H1B visa. So, two huge benefits of doing PhDs from United States, right? Lastly, you can also get an opportunity to transfer yourself from a lower rank to a higher ranked university, or if you want to manage your finances better, you can take a transfer from a university which is charging higher fees to a university which is charging lower fees. So for example, Srijit got a admission in CSU Northridge. It's a good university, but not a top one. And after first semester, he got transferred to UCLA. UCLA is among the top universities in US. And this transfer is done on the basis of how you have performed in semester one. So your academic performance is extremely critical, and that will determine not only your transfers like these, but would also determine the kind of grants and more financial aid that you can get. And I will discuss financial aid later on when I am on that slide. So these are the kind of advantages that US gives, and that is what makes United States the number one destination for students to go and study. So I will take my first pause here. And in case you have any questions related to what we have covered till now, you can put in the chat box and I'll be very happy to answer a few of them. Any questions for whatever we have covered till now? You can put your questions in the chat box and I'll be happy to take a few of those. How much percentage is required to get in top universities, Seth? I have a separate slide for that. I will show you that. I will cover that. The percentages and the kind of admissions criteria are the next part of my presentation. I'll cover that. Okay, so let me now move forward so that we can cover things. So we have so far discussed what are the kind of destinations where you can go, and we have looked at slightly into what are the kind of pros and cons. Now let's look at what does a university want in a prospective candidate. What are the admissions criteria? In India, admissions are happening primarily either on the base of your age in class plus twos or on the base of your entrance tests. Yeah, so when you go from a bachelor's to a master's, you tend to write exams like GATE. You tend to write some other exams which are competitive in nature, and quite a lot of places you also have to showcase your academic prowess by this. They look at your marks, but predominantly it's an exam that you need to give. So if you want to do MBA, you have to write CAT exam or some other exams like XAT, MAT, all symbiosis, all these exams are there. If you want to do something in masters, GATE is the exam. There are some separate exams of some PSUs also that are happening. Railways has its own programs for engineers. Indian Engineering Services is a different exam. People who want to go into civil services, of course, have to write UPSC. So it's predominantly one exam which takes into consideration your performance. But when you go and you want to go abroad, then these are the things that the university will look at. So they will ask you to write an exam called GMAT or a GRE. And this is the list. I will discuss all these things in detail in my forthcoming slides. So, and we are not from a natively English speaking country. So we need to showcase our proficiency by appearing for the tests like TOEFL and IELTS. TOEFL, IELTS are English proficiency tests where they test your skills like English speaking, writing, reading, listening. And you have to write these exams if you want to go into Europe, Australia, US, Canada, UK. Apart from Singapore, you will have to write these exams for pretty much everywhere. Academic record will be looked at. They will look at your extra activities. They will look at your research work. They will look at what kind of internships do you have. Do you have experience? They will ask you to submit some letters of recommendation. Each university will want you to submit some statement of purpose or essays. Sometimes they're also called personal statements. And the top universities also take your interviews. So these are the criterias which will be looked at by a university abroad when they decide whether to give you admit or not to give you admit. And the important point to consider is that no single criteria out of these on its own can be good enough, can guarantee you a admit. So suppose you have a great academic record, it will still not guarantee you that you will get a place in a top university. Yes, it will make your profile better, but it will not guarantee you a top admit. If you score top scores in GRE, GMAT, yes, your profile becomes great. Yes, your applications becomes a great head, but it is not guaranteeing that you will be admitted for sure, because there are 5 other criterias or 6 other criterias which a university will look at. So no single criteria will be on its own able to get you admitted or get you rejected, right? So what is important is, and for an Indian student, this is a major pitfall, that we keep on focusing on only 2 things: a GRE or GMAT score and an academic score. We don't work, we don't put too much effort, we don't deep dive into the other criteria. And that is where, in spite of having potential to get into top universities, sometimes the students miss out on the admits because they have not invested sufficient time to get themselves prepared on the other criteria, right? So let's now look at each of these criteria one by one. What do you and what is required? So let's look a quick you know difference between a GMAT or a GRE. So GMAT, GRE both are aptitude and reasoning exams. They can be taken anytime around the year, very unlike CAT or GATE, where they have specific dates. This is done 6 times a week, every day, 5 days a week, the exam happens, and you can take them any time when you are ready. And both of these are lengthy exams, close to 4 hours, 3.5 hours, and both are multiple choice in nature. And both of them will be testing your ability in quant and verbal mainly, but they also have a section called analytical and writing assessment, where you are given tasks to write. GMAT has a separate section which is called integrated reasoning, which is quite similar to the data interpretation and logical reasoning section of the CAT exam. And GMAT is predominantly for your business management programs, and GRE is mainly taken for MS and PhD, although now a lot of B schools are also accepting GRE scores. So broadly, the rule is that if you want to go into business side, GMAT should be the exam. Masters, GRE should be the exam. But there are many B schools now which are accepting GRE also. So we need to be mindful of that at the time of shortlisting of universities, that for which program, if a GRE score is being accepted, you can choose to do GRE. If a GMAT score is mandatory, you can choose to write GMAT. Both these exams, the scores are valid for 5 years, and therefore it is important to actually start early, write these exams early, and then give yourself sufficient time to prepare on the other criteria that are required, right? So that's predominantly GRE and GMAT. If you want, we can do a question. So let's do a question. If you can take a minute, that's a verbal question. And You can take a minute and write your options, your answer options in the chat box, and then we can see how we have solved it. So yeah, take a minute, and then we will look at what, how to do about it. And put your answers in the chat box. Okay. So can I have some answers in that box? Okay, I have got some responses. Karthik is saying D, Piyush C, Harsh D. Okay, a lot of you have said D. Some of you have said C. Okay, so thank you for the responses, and let's look at how this question has to be done. Let's look at how this has to be done. So, usually it will take only 5 seconds or maximum 7 seconds to do it. So they are asking you, what can you infer from the above? Leave the 3 lines which are written above. Leave the 3 lines. Focus on the word infer. Now, whenever this word is asked, and then they ask you what is inferred. Now, inference means what is the conclusion that you derive out of the passage. And conclusion not necessarily will be a fact. A fact can be a conclusion, but every conclusion might not be a fact. For example, if I go outside my house and look at the clouds, I can conclude that it will rain today. You can look at the same clouds and see and say that it will not rain today. So your conclusion or your inference is different from mine, and none of us might be true or false at the same time. So whenever you find a question when it says inference, without wasting any time, quickly look at the options and search for the option which mentions something which is not definite, right? So let's look at this. The first option says there will not be any cricket matches in Australia. Will not be. That means that's a definite thing. कि match नहीं होंगे, right? So that's not what we are looking at. At least some players were involved. Again, something definite. कि ये तो involved ही थे. Again, this is something definite. Cricket matches may have difficulty finding sponsors. May have. हो भी सकता है, नहीं भी हो सकता है. So it is not definite. And the Australian cricket lovers will be disappointed with the players. Again, something which is disappointed. So inference में हमने ढूंढना ये है something which is not definite. So our answer will be option C. Option C is the option where we are not getting something definite. So that's how lots of tricks and techniques and strategies and how to identify which technique to be used in a particular question. That's what the GRE or GMAT preparation is all about, right? Let's quickly move on next. We talked about academic grades. Academic grades mean they will look at your bachelor's and beyond. They will not ask you questions about your class 10th and 12th. Your 10th and 12th marks will not be considered when you apply abroad. They will only look at your bachelor's degree. Then extra activities. This is very, very important when we are talking about a MBA or any business program. Extra activities are of greater weightage in a management or a B school program because these activities give a clear cut indication to the university about your overall holistic development and how likely are you to succeed in varying and different kind of activities. When you study abroad, you are in a cross cultural, very very diverse environment where people would be involved in lots of team activities, and therefore how likely are you to succeed in them. These extra activities give a clear cut indications to the university. Let's see what research work is. And research work is most important for students in a master's and a PhD application, lesser for a management application. Similarly, extra activities are of less importance in a master's application. And what do we mean by research? Any project that you do as a part of your curriculum, any internship that you do as a part of your curriculum, if you participate in a even departmental level or a university level symposium or a seminar where you presented paper, participating in the form of an audience is not counted. You need to present papers. That is what gives you a lot of weightage. Your industrial trainings, of course, and any kind of paper publishing or a participation in the events is important. So research work is very important for your master's application. It is the most important factor in scholarships as far as master's applications are concerned, and PhD applications also. PhD is all about research. So your research will become the most important component of the application when you apply for a PhD or a master's. It is of slightly lower weightage, as I told earlier, in a business management program. For business management, they will look at your extra activities more, right? Some more components of the application, as I said, they would ask you to write some essays or statement of purpose. So essays are all about you. You won't get any topic to write. ऐसा नहीं आएगा कि write an essay on nuclear disarmament or write an essay on climate change. No. Essays are the opportunity where an admission committee is asking questions to you about you, your life experience, how you have been preparing yourself, what are the kind of abilities you have beyond academics. They will ask you questions about why do you want to do this course, why from that university, what makes you skilled enough to get into that course, right? Why did you choose that course? All these questions are going to be asked in SOP. They will ask you, how do you, express yourself creatively? They might also ask you, explain some situation where you demonstrated leadership. Explain some situation where you failed and how did you deal with it? So all these questions are about you, and it is basically a tool for our admission officer to know you more, to know who is the person beyond the application, what are the values that you cherish. And these essays are the most important part of your application. These essays would be the game changer beyond your GMAT and academics. And since the top universities and the good universities have acceptance rates in single digits or very, very lower double digits, these essays are one of the things which actually help the admissions committee officer to build up a mind towards admitting you or rejecting you. LORs, you will need 3, and these LORs can be taken from your college professor, college dean, your research guide. If somebody is working somewhere or doing internship somewhere, you can take LORs from there also. Let's quickly look at some of the deadlines, and since someone had asked the question also, so these are some prominent deadlines and the scores that are required for US, right? So these are some of the top universities. Deadlines would be mostly in December, January. The application deadlines are in, a good idea, indication of how to build a reverse roadmap, how to do that. So suppose I am in the final year now, and I have to go and my classes in fall 21, right? So the deadline would get over in December this year or January next year. Yeah. So we have 4 months to go. So these 4 months have to be then made in the form of a roadmap what to do. Ideally, this thing should be started in second year, first year preferably, right? So that you have a lot of time to build this roadmap and to do all those activities and to invest your time to build a strong application. You can look at the scores also that are required in GRE for MS, and these are some top scores. Average you will look at nothing less than a 155 in a GRE, quant and verbal. Of course, if you're doing engineering related program, quant scores will be more required. If you're doing some other programs, there is a broad mix, and these are broad guidelines of what kind of scores are required. Some details about Canada, the top universities, and as I told you, uh, Canada is more on your academics. So your marks, look at these marks: 65%, 75%, or GPAs, high GPAs, high marks required. Some places you will not be required for a GRE, only marks would be required. And of course, there are some places where it is written GRE is recommended. When something is recommended, it is always a good idea to do that thing and send the score. So when somebody says recommended, you must go on to write the GRE and submit the score, because that will help, to distinguish your profile. That will help the admission committee to be able to compare you with the students in a much better way. GRE, as you know, is a standard test across the globe. So it really helps if you have a GRE score, especially if your academics is slightly lower. If your academics is slightly lower, then it's a very, very good idea to write a GRE score, get a good GRE score, and then send it, so that they can look at that. Yes, you have a decent academic, performance in a standard test, right? Let's quickly go through the details of Germany. Germany is a very, very popular destination, and quick pointers about Germany: lots of Nobel Prize winners, a lot of master's programs now available in English language also, and the education is free in public universities. They don't charge you for tuition fees. You're only expected to bear your living expenses, and at the beginning of every semester or a year, they will charge you a minimum amount, which is admission fee one time, but otherwise no tuition fees. So some of the top universities in Germany are called TUs, the Technical Universitats. These are like the Ivy Leagues in US. Very, very competitive, very, very competitive, extremely competitive. But these German education is very well known across the globe. If you get a great German education, you are you are very, very highly valued across the globe, and job opportunities are great. So some entry requirements, and you can again look at this is more competitive. Not only are GPAs high, but they also mandate a GRE or recommend a GRE. So you have to get a good GRE score as well as have a great academic record to get into the top universities of Germany, right? So Germany is very, very competitive, extremely, extremely competitive, much more competitive as compared to a Canada, and a Europe. Very, very competitive. Let's look at Ireland, one of the countries in Eurozone which has come up very well, especially if you want to do something in computer science and IT, and also in fields like life sciences and biopharma. So Ireland is the biggest exporter of computers in the world. The top, it's being developed as a second Silicon Valley, and the top IT companies have their European offices inside Ireland. And only country inside Eurozone after UK where English is the mode of communication. So that gives a unique advantage to Ireland. Some of the universities in Ireland are these top universities. These are really good ones, and you can have a quick look at these. These are well-known names, right? So Again, I'll take a moment to pause here. Let's have one or two questions if you have anything to ask. There are some questions which are here. I'll already answer them. So minimum percentage required, I have already answered through my slides. Any concession of SC/ST students where we get scholarship for GRE abroad, I'm sorry, Akash, no such provision abroad, right? Abroad is purely on merit. Rahul, you have asked, there is not, yeah, you have written already. So please tell us about MBA. I'll cover MBA in my next presentation scenario. Don't worry, it's coming. MBA also. So not many questions here. Is PhD free in US? Yes, PhD is free in US. MS and PhD free in Germany. So Germany, all the courses in public universities are free. No tuition fee. You only have to bear your living expense. In private universities, they will charge you. Scholarships, Akash, I'll cover in my further slides. So Rituja, MBA is a different field, not different field. It's a different course of study. By field, we mean if I am a civil engineer, can I do course in electronics, master's course in electronics? MBA is a different course of study, right? So you can do an MBA after doing, whichever field in Europe, but you will not be able to do a bachelor's in civil engineering and master's in computer science engineering in a UK university. That would be even difficult in US, but yes, you can still apply and try for. That is what we mean. You cannot change the field of study. MBA is a different curriculum as together. So bachelor's and master's, that's what we are talking about. Where is the good scope for environment engineering, Akash? Everywhere good scope of environment engineering. I'm sure some courses in time. Any courses, SAF, which don't require IELTS, most of the colleges will require IELTS when you will have to write IELTS. Some colleges might not need a GRE or GMAT, but IELTS has to be done. Otherwise, how will they come to know that whether you are able to, speak or read or understand English? That's very important. Where is the good scope for MS in mechatronics? Mechatronics is very well in Germany, great in USA, some good courses in Canada also. UK also has some great courses. So all these places are good for mechatronics. Yeah. And now I'm going to courses only. So you will have some more clarity when I show courses. So these are some courses for students in computer science. Yeah. Computer science engineering courses. You can get into software engineering. You can get into MIS, data science, cybersecurity. You can get into engineering management, artificial intelligence. You can get into human-computer interaction. That's a great course nowadays. Business analytics and MSc management you can do in spite of whatever field you are in. So mechanical engineering, these are the courses. Automotive, aerospace, manufacturing, production, mechatronics, computational mechanics, engineering management, robotics, and of course, business analytics and MSc in management. These are courses for mechanical engineering students. For biotechnology students, these are the courses. Bioinformatics, computational biology is a great course now, more in the COVID scenario. It's coming up very, very well. Molecular and cell biology, biochemistry, food technology, bioengineering. These courses will be hugely in demand. Post-COVID, health tech is the field which will be greatly in demand. Till now, we have been working with fintech. You also have a great ed tech boom across the globe. But now health tech, it's the time for health tech. Immunology, you are immunity in every sentence nowadays. Any ad you see immunity being talked about. So these are some great courses now for biotechnology students. Civil engineering students, yes. Structural engineering, environmental engineering. So this is what I mean by changing field. You can of course go for civil engineering, but you can also go for financial engineering. That's what I mean by changing field. You can also go into business analytics. You can go into energy, sustainable and renewable. This is a great field now. energy, environmental things. Environmental engineering is here. Then civil engineering, lots of courses are coming up now in urban planning and smart city design. That's a huge course now that is coming in, right? So these are some courses for civil engineering, and some courses which you can do in spite of your field. And now, although I have written in each of the slides, but still to do this, computational finance and financial engineering are where you use the tools of computing to solve problems of finance. Engineering management is for people who are engineers, technocrats by background, but want to go into management, technical management. Biomedical engineering, data science, and business analytics, we know are the buzzwords now. Environment, climate change is being talked everywhere. Operations research and manufacturing engineering, great programs. Some management programs that any one of you can take. MBA, MIM, and I will showcase what is MBA and MIM. You can do MS in finance, MS in operations management, MS in technology management, business analytics, and of course, logistics and supply chain management. These are great management programs to do. Now, let me talk to you about what is the difference between an MBA and MIM. So, it is a common myth that you need to have some work experience to go and do an MBA. While it is quite largely true, but now there are many MBA programs, and I will show them to you, where you can go without any work experience also. Similarly, there are some great programs which are called MIMs. MIMs are Masters in Management, where you as a fresher or up to 2 years of WorkX can go and study a top quality international education, which is Masters in a management field. And post these MIM programs, you get entry-level positions and you get great jobs. Jobs are reasonably well paid off also. And these are, as I said, very, very economical as compared to an MBA program. The duration is also lower as compared to MBA. And these are the options for a student who is not having any work, but yet would want to go into a top quality management education. So these are the broad differences. I'm sure you have looked at the screen. Masters in Management was started in Europe, but it has now picked up across the globe. And these are some of the top MIM programs across the world. HEC Paris, London School of Economics, ESAID, Oxford University, London Business School, Imperial College of London, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Richard Ivey, Michigan Ross, Duke Fuqua. Great, programs where you can do a MIM program. Some MBA programs where you can go without a WorkX, right? So you can be in the pre-final or final year of your course and you can apply to these programs. These are actually called the deferred admission programs. So you can look at Harvard, it is written 2+2. So 2+2 means when you are in final year, you apply, you get an admission, then you are supposed to go for a 2-year WorkX. And when you come back after 2-year WorkX, you can complete your 2-year MBA program in Harvard. That's a 2+2. Great options for students who want to go into MBA without a WorkX. And these programs are very competitive, would need a great GMAT score and a very, very strong profile to get into them. But these options are available. You can't get into an MBA without WorkX. So that is not the case now. Something which I want to tell is that STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, these fields are greatly valued in the US. So usually what happens is, if I do a non-STEM program, suppose I do a MS in, let's say, a program in English literature. It is a non-STEM program, right? So after every course in US, I get a time period of 1 year. That means 12 months to be in the country and try and find a job. That's called OPT, optional practical training. I am doing a STEM course, then this OPT is increased to 3 years. So that means if I am doing a non-STEM course, my chances of H1B visa are only one, because my OPT is of 12 months, and in 12 months the H1B lottery is only done once. So मुझे एक chance मिलेगा to go through the H1B lottery. If I don't get a visa, I'll have to come back. But if I'm in a STEM course, I get to stay in US for 3 years, and therefore I get to appear for H1B lottery in 3 years, 3 times. And since 60% of H1B visas are given to Indians, you will have to be extremely unlucky as an Indian not to get a H1B visa in 3 years, right? So great opportunity for students, because US native population is only 30 to 40% STEM enabled. And as my graph is showing, now close to 7 out of 10 jobs in US are being created in STEM field. तो STEM की डिमांड बहुत ज्यादा है, उनकी नेटिव पॉपुलेशन उसके लिए इक्विप्ड नहीं है, so they need more people from outside, and that is why they are giving more OPT and more H1B chances to people who are from outside. And in fact, Trump made a great positive change. It's not being talked about, but he added to what Obama did. Obama made this change of 3 years OPT in 2015. And Trump in his 4 years has made a very positive change. It's not being talked about much, is that now every year, if you do a master's from US, then they give 16% more H1B visas to students who have done masters from US. So by doing that, they are giving 5,400 more H1B visas to students who have done masters from US. So very good opportunity to do great STEM programs and get great jobs in US. Some top STEM programs: you can do MS in finance, you can do MS in technology management, you can do MS in business analytics, you can do MS in logistics and supply chain management. And of course, now a lot of MBA programs have become STEM programs, and these are now available in all universities, especially the universities in US which are ranked 200 to 400. There is a huge competition in these universities to get great students. They're having some wonderful programs. And if you get through these universities, of course, if you get into top 100, nothing like it. But if you're able to get into 100 to 300 or even 100 to 400, you will be in for a great program inside a US university, because all of these universities are having some wonderful course options, right? And now let me look at how can you earn scholarships. Scholarships is a part of financial aid. So you get scholarships, you get grants, and you also get on-campus jobs and internships. So on-campus jobs and internships you get only on the basis of your first semester academic performance. Now scholarships are announced at the beginning of admission, right? And you don't have to do anything to get it. You just have to make a very strong application, and basis your merit, they will give you a scholarship. Grants are given you again on the basis of your performance in the academics and the overall performance. They keep on giving you grants. You need to apply for them when you are in the university. But assistantship, as the word says, you need to work for it. So you can get a teaching assistantship where you assistant teacher, you can get a research assistantship where you assist a research scholar. And most of the Indian students or international students end up getting research assistantships after doing their first semester. So it's not that when you reach USA, when you reach in a university, it's all party time. No, you need to keep on focusing hard, focusing great on your performance, both academic and not academic, so that you get chances of internships, you get chances of on the campus jobs, and you get chances of getting those assistantships. And these assistantships are very, very helpful in times they get combined with fee waivers. So what happens is that once US universities have two kind of fees. Some universities, some fees are for students who are domestic students, so there'll be you know uh, in-state fees, which is for people who are domestic to that country or that state. But for students like us who are from abroad, the fees is outstate. And usually this outstate fees is three to four times more than the in-state fees. So if for example, the fees for a program is $10,000 for an in-state student, then for Indian student, it would be close to $40,000. Now, when you get an assistantship on the basis of your strong academic performance, and let's say you get a research assistantship, then what they do is since you get that assistantship, they consider you employed by the university. And since they consider you employed by the university, you start getting treated as an in-state person. And when you start getting treated as an in-state person, your fees automatically gets dropped. So for example, if the fees of your program was, let's say, $40,000, okay, and you went there on 50% scholarship, so your fees, that means, was $20,000. You get an assistantship, you get treated as an in-state person, and the in-state fees was $10,000. So now instead of 20,000, you are paying $10,000. So your $10,000 have also been saved. So that's how you earn scholarships and grants. And as I told you earlier, 100% tuition fees waiver for PhD. So that's how you can earn scholarships. Lastly, before I end and take some questions, how does Jamboree help you? So Jamboree is into training of students, as I told you at the beginning. So we will give you complete solutions for your training of GRE or GMAT, your classroom training, and now we are doing online till the time classroom campuses don't open. So training with complete study material, online portal for testing, unlimited doubt clearing sessions. We will give you full length mock tests. We will give you a lot of webinars, which are not only for doubt clearing, but also for your application building. We will, of course, give you 1-year course validity. So you can keep on doing batches and classes till the time your 1-year validity gets over. And of course, we also work with students to build their applications. So we can work with you to do shortlisting for you of universities. We will work with you for your building of roadmap in terms of when to do GRE, when to do GMAT, what all activities to be done, how to enhance your extracurricular profile, how to do online courses, what kind of research options to be done, how to present your extra activities, building your SOPs, building your resume, building your essays, how to write your letters of recommendations, who will be your recommenders. And we also give you guidance on how to finance your courses, how to get visas. We will also work with you to submit these applications on time. So all these things are done with the student from complete end to end. And of course, we have a history of great scores with DTU also. So fee discounts to students who are from DTU, and I don't know how well this screen is visible, but these two students and these few students are from DTU. Some of the great scores that we have from DTU, I don't know how well I am able to display those, but these are DTU specific results. So it is Devanjot and one more guy who has scored GMAT 760, GRE 340, and of course we have Navya and we have Zaravar and Sukriti Verma who have scored great in GRE, and Rishabh, Rajib and Ashish Kumar who have scored great in GMAT. So DTU, we have a history where students have come and succeeded, and therefore great fee discounts. You can of course connect with this number. This is of my colleague Abhishek, who handles the DTU as a account for us, in charge, heading our marketing department for Delhi. So that's all from my side. These are my credentials: name, number, email ID. If you want to connect with me, you can do that.